I can't emphasize strongly enough the countercultural importance of our orientation towards suffering. Let me tell you another story. Dr. Sylvester Krčméry was a young Catholic physician who was a leader in the underground church in Slovakia. In the early 1950s, the secret police grabbed him off the street and threw him into prison, where he remained for a decade. He says in his memoir that when they pulled him off and threw him into the car, pulled him off the street and threw him into the car, he started laughing because he knew that this is what Jesus had promised. And this freaked the secret police out. Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing? He was laughing because he knew he was being given the gift of sharing Christ's suffering. Well, he stayed in prison for an entire decade, and after he got out, he went back to evangelizing and working with the church. Many years later, after the fall of communism, Dr. Krčméry wrote a memoir about how he and the other Christians in that prison had come through with their faith intact. Once again, we see that a Christian's orientation towards suffering was the key. Dr. Krčméry said that he knew from the beginning that he could not allow himself to feel self-pity. If he did, he said, he knew he would collapse morally. Instead, he told himself that he was, quote, God's probe in that prison. What he meant was that the Lord had led him into that prison to be God's spy. Rather than brood over, why me, Lord, Dr. Krčméry got busy sharing the gospel with other prisoners, praying with them, worshiping with them, and comforting them. He construed his suffering in prison as an opportunity to deepen his own repentance and to serve others. A final story about suffering. When I was in Budapest in 2019 doing interviews for Live Not By Lies, my interpreter was a faithful young Catholic named Anna. She was a wife and mother of a small boy. As we rode on a tram through the city, Anna told me how frustrating it was to not to be able to relate to her friends, even her Catholic friends. She said that whenever she would try to tell them about the problems that she and her husband are having in their marriage or the struggles she has raising their little boy, her friends jump in to tell her, oh, wait, just get a divorce, put your son in daycare. They would tell her, you have to do whatever it takes to be happy. Anna said that they could not understand that she is happy. She loves being a wife and a mother, but life is not without its difficulties. But these friends of hers, again, even the Catholic ones, had this idea that suffering is to be refused, suffering of any kind, even inconvenience, is to be refused no matter what it costs. I said to Anna, sounds like you're fighting for your right to be unhappy. That's it, she said. That's exactly right. Where did you get that? So I pulled out my smartphone and went to chapter 17 of Brave New World. We read it together, and she saw that John the Savage, the dissident and the only sane man in this totalitarian world, admits to the world controller that, yeah, he is fighting for his right to be unhappy, because he's fighting for his right to be human. This is the unappealing fact facing all of us Christians. In the face of soft totalitarianism, all of us have to fight for our right to be unhappy. Now, it's not that misery is next to godliness, not at all. We are called to be joyful as Christians, but our idea of joy has to entail the joy of the martyrs who are willing to give their lives for the joy of serving the Lord. It has to entail the joy of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, praising God in that prison, in that furnace, as they were miraculously preserved. As John the Savage argues in Brave New World, without the right to be unhappy, that is, if suffering is banished from the world, all things truly human dissolve. We mere Christians living in this anti-Christian civilization must immerse ourselves and our families in the stories of the martyrs and the confessors, from the early church down to the church of our own time. We have to rediscover that their experience is normative Christianity. Just last week, I spoke to an evangelical friend who works with the persecuted church around the world. From his perspective, what's happening in America now simply means that America is joining the rest of the world and joining history. And we are now about to discover what life is like for many Christians in the world today and has been like for many Christians since the very beginning.